my counselor was dead wrong. He was dead wrong. A couple years ago, I went into counseling because I was in a really low period in my time. And I'm a Christian. You might be, you might not be. Totally welcome to be in this channel. And I hope it's helpful for you regardless. But I went to a biblical counselor, and it was during COVID season, so it was over Zoom. I'm totally fine with that. But we had sessions, and he said a number of things that seemed very, very helpful. I was hopeful that he could really help, and he did. And he gave me some principles and put into me some habits that have been beneficial and good. And I still remember those things. But then a few sessions in, like, he had listened to my story. He had listened to you, right? And he seemed to have concluded, maybe 4 sessions in or so, that he found the root of the problem. And he said, here it is. And he presented it to me. And I was like, no, that's not right. And I didn't quite know why. And it took a while, and I figured it out. And this is the thing that I figured out, and I actually figured it out probably about 2 years afterward. And I actually got to then see him in person. And I sat down and I read him this journal entry that I'm about to read to you right now. And I said, I think you're wrong. And I think this is really what the key to the problem was. And I'm going to share it with you. And I don't think you're going to like it at first. Are you ready? You might not like it. Here it is. The key aspect is my submission to God. I'll tell you a story. When I was about 6 years old, maybe 7, I was at my grandmother's house, my mom's mom, and we were there as a family. And my mom went out with her sisters, and they went shopping, and they came back, and I greeted them at the car. And my mom had this gift for me, and it was army men. Like, what 6-year-old, 7-year-old doesn't want army men? But for some reason, there was something like I didn't want them. I rejected them. She handed them to me, and I saw them, and I was in front of her and my aunts who were like in the car, getting out of the car, and I took them, and I was angry, and I rejected them, and I threw them down on the ground, and I stomped on them. Like, literally, this is what happened. I stomped on those army men, these great toy for boys, stomped on them. I was angry right in front of her and her sisters. Funny thing is, I don't remember experiencing any consequences for that behavior, which I should have experienced consequences for that behavior. But here's the thing. As Christians, do we not believe in a sovereign God, a God who gives us our circumstances? Yes, we might deserve them because of what we do, right? But God is sovereign. He is in control. He places us right where we are. He is the one in control and who gives us our circumstances. And so often we reject them, like I rejected that gift from my mom. And we get angry at our circumstances. We get angry at what God has placed in our lives and where he has put us. And we look at that person, or we think of this other ideal situation, and we get angry for where we are and who we are and what our circumstances are. And we reject God's present, God's future for us. And he rightly depresses us, right? Because what is depression? Depression is you can think of it as this pressing down of the hand of God, our emotions, our feelings. Think in contrast of these verses. This is 1 Samuel 3:18, and this is from my journal entry where it struck me And this was about maybe 2 years later, a year and a half or so later, after those counseling, where this guy, and I'll tell you what he said in a little bit, where he had this kind of diagnosis for me. Okay, I'll tell you what he said right now. He said, you need to change your job. Like this, okay, I can understand. My job was not bringing me enough money. It was bringing me stress. And it's good to reduce stress. It's good to get to a place of you have less stress. But my counselor didn't listen. He hadn't listened to me because we had met like 4 times, maybe more, up until this point. And he had heard that I'd been struggling with depression for like over a decade. And I had only had this job for like a year. So the job is not the problem. But he said, you need to change your job. And okay, that probably would have lessened my stress. And that's good to do. Like if we can change little things in life to help us with depression, let's do it. But that wasn't the root of the problem. I've been struggling with it for a decade or so, longer than that at this point. And so like he missed the mark. And I was frustrated by that because he wasn't listening to me. And how bad does it feel when you're going through depression and you're pouring your heart out to this person and you're being open with them and they didn't actually listen to you? Like that, I was in a good place, so I wasn't like depressed that he didn't listen to me, but that's not good. Anyway, like I said, I talked to him in person afterward and like almost 2 years later. But this is what struck me. Okay, 1 Samuel 13 says this. And this is Samuel after some bad stuff happened. You go look it up, read the context. But what he says is, it is the Lord, let him do what seems good to him. That was his response to these bad things that happened. He didn't say and have the attitude of, I'm in a bad situation, I'm upset at God, I don't accept his present and his future for me. No, he said, okay, it's the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. Right? And if you look at the context, this is when his sons died and his sons were punished. And he said, it is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. I might have got that context wrong. It might have been that this was like a prophecy from Samuel to Eli. Probably should have looked this up before. Anyway, this is real. I'm real. Go look it up. Look at the context for yourself. You can correct me in the comments below if you want to. But this was his response. I think this is Eli's response, right? Eli's response when he heard from Samuel, from the Lord, that the priesthood would be taken away from him. I think that's the context. But his attitude applies to us regardless of this, if I remember the context right or not. He says, it's the Lord, let him do what seems good to him. In other words, I'm not going to fight against him. Whether it's a bad thing that happens, in my opinion, I'm going to submit to the Lord. When we don't submit to the Lord, we get depressed. That's what struck me. Here's another one. Isaiah 45:9. Woe to him who strives with him who formed him. Right? When our circumstances, we don't like them, we strive against the one who formed us, the one who put us right where we are. A pot among earthen pots, that's what we are. Woe to him who strives with him who formed him, a pot among earthen pots. That's what we are. That's what we need to accept that we are. There's all these other pots around us. We are a pot. We need to accept where we are and where he has placed us. Here's the rest of the verse. Does the clay say to him who forms it, what are you making? Or your work has no handles. And this struck me because I was in a place where like I said, I wasn't making very much money, and I was looking at people who did. And I was like, man, they can give. I wanted to be able to give to the church. I wanted, like, good desires, right? Why can't I do this? And I was looking at this person, that person, the other person, and they could, and I couldn't. And my thought toward God was, why didn't you make me like them? And this verse struck me. You know, it's like, hey, they have handles, right? They're this more functional pot, a pot that's better suited for being used in better ways, more glorious ways, maybe. And me, I'm over here, I don't have any handles. I'm not as useful as them. But God placed me right here. He made me the exact pot that I am. If I fight against that, he's going to say, hey, Elias, and he's going to help me submit. And he's going to push down on me until I do submit, until I do realize I need to submit to him. He made me exactly like this for his purposes, and I shouldn't fight against that, right? That's Isaiah 45:9. And here's what I wrote. This is my journal entry. I'm like basically quoting myself, right? God, your work has no handles. And then I'm talking to myself. Fool, who are you to question God? He gave you life. Be grateful. If he chooses to give someone else handles, but not you, that's his prerogative. Put yourself in the right place, Elias. And then I said, oh, humility, you are so elusive, right? Because it's pride that makes me say, God, I'm not happy with how you made me, with the difficult circumstances that you might have brought into my life. I'm not happy with that. I'm rejecting that. I'm angry at you in this present and this future that you've given to me. I don't like it. It's pride. We're being prideful. At least that's how it was for me. It's pride. It's not submitting. Okay, you know this one. Job 2:10. But he said to her, this is Job talking to his wife. And I believe that he is being kind and a good shepherd to her right here. He says, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. I think he's saying, hey wife, you're not a foolish woman. Don't speak as one of them. Don't speak as one of them. You're not a foolish woman. What's he say to her? Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? Or you might translate that word calamity. Right? That's the question. So often we're like, oh, God's going to give me good. And that's what we want. Why isn't my life easier, God? I want a better life. That's why we get depressed. Whereas if we were to understand what Job understood, and we were to say to God, God, you have brought calamity into my life, I accept it. Can you do that? You're not going to be depressed if you're feeling that. Here's another one, Romans 9:20-21. But who are you, oh man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to its molder? Like, this is ridiculous. Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? It can't even talk. Of course it's not going to say that. But who are we to do that? God has molded us. God has placed us right where we are for his purposes. And maybe we can't see them. Sure. Like, depression is real. I've felt it over and over and over and over again. And I said, you might not like this, but it's been key for me. So think about it. Take some time. Think about it. Okay, let me finish reading this verse. Will what is molded say to its molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay to make out of the same lump, right? Think back to Isaiah. It's a very similar passage. To make out of the same lump one vessel for honorable use and another for dishonorable use, you might be the vessel for dishonorable use. And you're going through a hard time. And that person over there, they're living life and it's easy. Well, you don't see their difficulties, right? That's part of it. That's a huge part of it. We got to realize they do have difficulties, but we don't see them. And so we think everything is fine with them. But maybe they are in a better situation than you, and you're in a worse situation than them. What's your attitude? What's your response? Are you angry at God for putting them in a better situation and putting you in a worse? Fool. Should you speak back to your Maker and say, why have you made me like this? I know it's hard. I know it's heavy. But think about it. Is that what you do? That's what I do oftentimes. God, why have you placed me here? I'd rather be there. Why have you put me in these difficult circumstances? I don't like it, and just spirals into this angry, depressed, I don't like it. I don't want to be here. I reject your present and your future that you've written for me. And then I wrote this. I said, the great misdiagnosis. And I was thinking about that counseling session where that guy said, oh, your depression is because you're anxious and you're nervous and you have anxiety in your job. You're worried. Get a different job, get a better pay, get a place where it's more stable, and depression's gonna be gone. That's gonna be the big solution. No, that's the misdiagnosis. That's the great misdiagnosis. And I wrote this. Oftentimes my depression is right. It's right. It's just. It's fitting. It should be where I am. Right? It is a just and fitting pressing down on my life from the hand of God because I have rejected him as king over my life. I'm putting this out there because it helped me. Maybe it'll help you. Have you ever experienced this? I'd love you to share in the comments, if you would, down below. Has this been something that you've seen as well in your struggle against depression? Let me keep reading, right? I've rejected him as king over my life. I have not been happy with the circumstances that he has sovereignly and wisely ordained for my life. I do not accept them as a humble, lowly servant, as a creature, right? Think about the word creature. It's a creation, someone that's been created underneath this sovereign. I do not accept them as a creature, a lowly created being. I want to have part in the prerogatives and the decision-making areas that are not my realm. It's not my realm. I am a clay pot, and it is good for me to submit to the molding and the intention of the potter. That's what we need to do. Don't push back against the potter who forms you. This leads to depression. He will justly push you down for such disputing attitudes. Think of Philippians 2:14. And then I wrote this to myself, right? Journal, write to yourself, speak to yourself, help yourself diagnose and figure out what you're thinking and how you need to change. Here I wrote to myself, speak the words of Samuel, of Job. It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. Shall we receive good from him and not calamity also? Blessed be the name of the Lord. Okay, and I was confusing the 1 Samuel passage with this one. Leviticus 10:3, here's the last one. And Aaron held his peace. Because Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, this is what I was confusing for the 1 Samuel passage with. Nadab and Abihu had just died. God reached out with fire and destroyed them because they had sacrificed strange fire, right? And what was Aaron's response? Aaron did not get angry at God. He didn't say, God, you brought this bad situation into my life. He held his peace. That's what he did. So practical, what I do. At the end of every day, I have an app that puts up end of day tasks for me. And it includes like all the stuff that I want to do, like fill and load and run the dishwasher, right? Things like that. The last thing I have on here, it says, bless the Lord. And then in parentheses, submit to his sovereignty. That's what I tell myself to do every night. And I do it every night. And sometimes it's a whole lot easier. Sometimes I'm in my right mind and I'm happy and I'm feeling good and I can easily submit to God. Sometimes really good things happen that day and I can easily submit to God. And I'm like, wow, God, you blessed me lots today. But then other times, really difficult things will have happened, right? Really difficult things. Maybe I will have fallen into depression. This goes a long way to get me out. Get out every day. Get out is like, how many times have we been in depression for days on end? Structure your life to help yourself. Think through these things. And so I took this idea of this journal that I wrote, this light bulb moment. It's not my circumstances necessarily. Sure, I can change those, but it's my response to my circumstances that puts me into a depressed state. I'm fighting against God. You know, in Romans it says it is not good to kick against the goads. Look that up, study that one. That's what I'm doing when I'm depressed. And so I remind myself every single night, and sometimes, like I said, it's difficult because difficult things happened that day. I was depressed or trials came, hard times. But I look at this and I say, I need to bless the Lord. That's what Job did, right? Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's what he said. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I receive calamity today. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Because God hasn't changed, even though my circumstances might have. That's something to remember. God and his character and his purposes and his plans and who he is has not changed, even though my circumstances, my feelings have. So I can and should bless him. He is worthy of being blessed, being praised, being submitted to. And so I need to do that, like Job did. And so I say every night, bless the Lord, submit to his sovereignty. He placed me here. And friend, he placed you right where you are. It might be difficult. I get it. It might be difficult. You might hate it. But if you believe in a sovereign God, he has placed you there. Don't push back against him. Submit to him. And speak with your mouth. I bless you. I love you. You are good. God is good, and everything he does is good. So I hope that helps. Again, this is just some guy on the internet sharing my story, what happened to me, what has helped me, in hopes that it will help you. I'd love to hear in the comments how these thoughts might have helped you. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you're right with me with what I said at the beginning. You're not going to like this. Or maybe just share some tips that other people might be able to see that have helped you in your fight with depression. I'd love to interact and have that be a resource to others. Thanks for watching.